Speech with the club. Now, you had started a year ago. What
Couple years ago.
You came and checked on us a year ago.
Oh yeah.
Okay, and I guess we scared you away the first time.
No. My work schedule didn't work.
Okay. Well, it's nice to have him back, and he'll be giving his first speech today. Now, the first speech is, we don't expect you to be a perfect speaker to deliver everything perfectly, but it's really to see where you're at with your speaking, feel comfortable in front of this audience. So as a member, the crowd, just lots of smiles and plenty of applause, and I think Blake will do well. So good luck.
Thanks.
Thank you. Blake sent me a wonderful introduction. I'm afraid I wasn't able to memorize it, so you'll have to excuse my notes. The most important thing is that Blake Adams was born 26 years ago today in Southern California. And he moved to Berkeley over 2 years ago in pursuit of the opportunity to love his partner unconditionally, which I think is a beautiful thing. He was raised by respected business people and artists whose imagination, personal leadership, and well-rounded education led him to become an obsessive musician from the age of 5 till 16, developed into one of the fastest distance runners in California between the ages of 13 to 22, become a serious student of international finance for 3 years, and lastly, develop a respect for the power of different management and organizational styles and his experience working for other people in the restaurant industry since 2010. So he's done a lot. Today, he aims to let us create the speech we are interested in experiencing, achieve the objectives of speech number 1, and walk away with ideas for our next speech. So please welcome Blake. His title is The Interactive Icebreaker.
Thanks. So, in order to make an interactive icebreaker, I'd like to start off having you think for a moment about anything you've heard in the introduction or anything up to this moment now that sounded interesting to you, so that I can pick out some topics. And those are going to be the body of this speech. About it for a moment. If you have, feel free to raise your hand. What's your name also?
Sean.
Sean, cool.
Yeah, I'd like to hear about your 3 years being a student of international finance.
International finance? Okay. Well, okay. Okay. Anything else?
Yeah, Bailey here. I wanted to hear about your restaurant experience.
Okay. Awesome.
I want to hear about your distance trip.
Awesome. Okay.
I want to hear about your traditional
Wow. Okay. So all of it was interesting. I'll talk about 3 different topics, and I'll try to give a minute and a half to each. Was there, out of those 3, we have Bailey, we have John, we have Sean, and then Jojo. Thanks. I'm sorry, we've met before, but sometimes we have things. Between all of those 3, I guess Jojo could show a raise of hands who'd like to hear. Well, no, there was only 3 topics. Never mind. So, international finance, distance running, and then unconditional love. I think that's it, right? Oh, restaurant experience. So there's 4. Sorry to back up. Okay, so restaurant experience, show of hands. Okay, so it looks like it's going to be the other 3. Okay. So the first part of my speech, I'll talk about international finance. So up to that point, I think part of what made me really interested in international finance originally going in was I was always interested in politics. And I was always interested in the arguments around politics, around both sides of the left and the right. And as I started looking at sort of the basics of like the arguments and the assumptions, I felt like, there seems to be a lot of interest in power structures. And as I started looking at that, I wanted to see, well, who seems like where and what defines these power structures, and it led me to like really be interested in finance. And I just noticed that, well, people who are in the business of allocating capital tend to, like, if you look at like the wealthiest people in the world tend to be in allocating capital. And so I wanted to study and sort of understand why that was in a philosophical way, in a practical way, and what sort of ways did those people think, and how did they think 100 years ago or 200 years ago, 300 years ago, and then how did that system evolve and what made money have value in the first place? So it led me to sit in a lot of like classes about the history of banking and the history of money and currency crises and what causes nations to collapse and, in terms of their currency and what sort of things, what is the logic behind like driving what causes that to happen. I majored in corporate finance, and although the focus of that was mostly for individual corporations, what's the ideal way for them to raise money for their own, for the way that the nature of their business, and that doesn't necessarily connect with the political aspect. I think that it gave me a very practical and grounded viewpoint in the real interface between money and then like how it gets there and then why it's getting there. I think that was kind of a good thing. So international finance, after school, college, 2009, I had about a 9-month period where I was trying to apply to jobs and get into finance, but 2009 was a really tough time to get a job. I ended up getting into restaurants, which will transition to my, oh, no, I'm not talking about restaurants. So I ended up going into restaurants, still studying finance on the side, but then found that I seriously had a lot to learn in restaurants personally. So I focused on that more and pursued promotions in that. So I guess moving on to distance running. What the story behind distance running was, I started running in 6th, 7th grade, got into it because I really wanted to play basketball, but was pretty small and weak, and felt like maybe endurance could become an advantage of being able to play harder for longer. So I started running every day before school, and then I found and discovered that I really wanted to go to this this boarding school. I kind of wanted to move out of my house and away from my parents, and convince them that if I met these objectives of theirs, I would be worthy of going to this school of my dreams. So they told me, okay, that's fine. You got to practice your piano at least an hour a day. You got to do straight A's and get straight A's, and you have to, you have to run. I don't know, something like you have to run or exercise every day or something. There was some goal. So I think it was like 3 miles a day or something. So. But you have to do this without us telling you, because you're going to be living away from us, and we don't want to have to, like, you're going to have to manage yourself. So I did that, and going into high school, they kind of didn't have the choice, because I sort of met their challenge, so I got to go to the school that I really wanted to go to. In school, that was sort of a way for me to combat the awkwardness of being small and being a little bit insecure, is to be as good as I could at sports. I always felt kind of insecure about that, and ended up having this dream of being state champion in cross country, and it took about 4 years for me to develop to a level where I almost got there. I didn't quite get there, but I was one of the fastest people in the state, so it was kind of an interesting path of figuring out how to compete with the strengths you have and being persistent over time. So I have about 30 seconds left to talk about unconditional love and wrap it up. And I guess as I think about the circumstances that can change in your life, where you might be able to draw strength and what will matter to the most number of people, and maybe the most number of in your interactions with other, even animals. Maybe that's not really the way I want to go about this. But I think that to be able to accept pain and deal with suffering and forgive, and to realize what is whole and what stays constant within you and that you never lose, there's got to be a connection between that and unconditional love. Because when things hurt you, or when you have expectations on your people who you love and they don't meet them and you feel hurt, or it becomes a point of contention or a point of losing love, then I think that's where the suffering happens, and I think that's also where you have the opportunity to grow into unconditional love. And I think unconditional love is the way of finding a way of still loving beyond all the changing circumstances and the pain that happens. So that's why I felt that it was the most valuable thing for me to focus on a couple years ago, because as I started becoming more and more scared about the future and what my future would look like, I felt that it's just very it's going to be okay if I have that, whatever happens. So wrapping it up, why I joined Toastmasters. I'm 2 minutes over, so it doesn't really matter at this point. Wrapping up why I joined Toastmasters was for 3 things. One was to learn how to teach and communicate in new ways, experiment, but still stay and learn from the structure of the Toastmasters curriculum. So I want to meet the objectives, which being 3 minutes over now, I haven't, but for today, but some hopefully maybe I did. But also experiment and take risks with every speech, so that both of us, all of us, can learn more. And maybe you'll want to try out and do some of the things that I tried and do it better than I did, or maybe I will. So that was one of them. And then the other was so that I could, on the unconditional love bent, to really try to see past whatever it is you're presenting of yourself, and hopefully be able to see the potential in everyone here, because everyone here seems to be very bright and so different and diverse. And if you can see, I'm hoping that I can sort of see use my imagination and see the most within every person here, so that maybe I don't know, maybe that'll help me in the unconditional love thing. The other thing about why I'm in Toastmasters has to just do with learning about how the structure and the curriculum of Toastmasters produces results and what those are. Thank you.